Today we're going to be learning Yoma Daf Pedalid, really nearing the end of the Masechet. This week's learning is sponsored by Alana and Danny Storch. Thank you to our dear friends Miriam and Eric Feldstein for their generous hospitality throughout the years with love and deep appreciation. This week's learning is also sponsored by Howard Jacoby Rubin in honor of Debbie Jacoby for a wonderful first decade of married life together. So glad that Hashem helped us find each other through Torah. And today's daf is sponsored in memory of Hannah Plunka, Hannah Esther Bat Eliyahu Eliezer on her yahrzeit. Okay, just a quick review of the week in advance. We're going to be finishing the Masechet Yoma on Thursday, but those attending the Siyum will only be next Sunday. So Thursday's Shiur will be up as usual if anybody wants to listen and finish the Masechet. If not, you're all invited, and I hope you'll all come to the Zoom Shiur on July 11th on Sunday, a week from today. 8:30 Israel time, wherever that is where you are. Sorry for those who it ends up in the middle of the night. And I know people here wake up for sports games in the middle of the night. So if you want, you could try to wake up for Siyums in the middle of the night. And so everyone's invited there. So you don't need to listen to Thursday's Shiur, but if for whatever reason you want to, you can. You can also then listen later to the Siyum because there'll be other Shiurim as well. So highly recommended attending the Siyum. And there's Siyums around the country. So if you haven't registered for those yet in Israel, also some of the WhatsApp groups I know in some of the Hadron communities that communicate through WhatsApp are arranging Siyumim in their areas. So if you're not part of a WhatsApp community, please join, and then you'll find women learning in your area. We have a lot of different areas around the world, not everywhere, but a lot of places. And if you're near something, we could try to match you up. If there's nothing so close to you, you can at least communicate with women not far from you. And then also there'll be some people getting together either by Zoom or in person for Siyumim around the world. And Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, obviously, which is the last day of the Siyum, that day I will not be around this week. So we're not learning on Zoom, but I will have recordings of all the Shiurim up. They'll be up at 6 in the morning Israel time, so they'll be up early. For some people, that might be the night before if you want to get ahead. So the Shiurim will all be there. That's this week. So no Zoom on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week. Okay, with that, we're going to get started. So we ended with this strange thing about a wild dog. If you thought that was strange, wait till today when we talk about how to deal with a dog bite, or if the dog rubs up against you, what's the remedy for it? Okay, and we're going to get into one of those Gemaras. It's our typical Gemaras about all sorts of strange sounding remedies that the Gemara offers. So the first thing we had was yesterday, we had a basic machloket at the very end of the daf about what's the purpose of how does it happen that the dog becomes this mad dog? So Rav had said it was witchcraft and a spell was put upon it, and Shmuel says it was an evil spirit. The nafkamina, the difference, the halacha would be whether you have to kill it by keeping your distance, or can you go up close to it. If it's witchcraft, you can go up right against it. If it's an evil spirit, you have to stick far away, try to shoot an arrow, something like that. Tanya, and that's what Shmuel had said. So Tanya Kabatei Shmuel, we're not going to have a braita to support Shmuel's reading. When you kill it, you have to throw something at it. That shows that braita supports Shmuel, that it must be an evil spirit, and we have to keep our distance. Next, if he rubs up against you, this wild dog, it's dangerous. If he bites you, you'll die. So now we're going to find out, well, what do you do if in the event that one of these two things happens? Obviously, it seems you don't die right away. So let's try to figure out how to deal with it. So if he rubs up against you, what do you do? Take off your clothes, leave them there, and run away. Rav Huna b'reit Rav Yoshua, just in case you didn't really believe this, it happened to him. A dog rubbed up against him, a wild dog. One of them rubbed up against him in the shuk, in the market. He took off his clothes in the middle of the market. I don't know, it doesn't get into detail how far down he dressed, but he probably took off his outer garments and threw it on the floor and ran away. He said, I fulfilled the verse that wisdom will keep you alive. As he said, the fact that I learned this and I knew exactly what the remedy was saved my life. Right? This is the rabbis always sticking in, it's good to sit and learn Torah because then you'll know how to deal with wild dog rubbings up against you. Okay, next. If he bites you, you will die. So what do you do? Take the skin of a male hyena and write on it, Ana planya bar planita, I ploni ben ploni, right? I, this X, my name is this, the son of this. I'm writing to you on the hide of a male hyena. Kanti kalirus, okay, which seem like nonsense words. We've seen this before, that they believed in certain incantations. This is a funny one because Amrila, some people say kandi kalorus. Okay, and kanti and kandi are spelled one with a kaf, one with a kuf. They weren't sure how it was spelled. They weren't sure how it was pronounced. Was it a dalet or a taf? Kandi, kanti. Was it kaloris? Oh, kalirus or kalorus. Okay, they weren't sure how to pronounce it exactly. This happens often when people recite things and then it gets passed down and somebody heard it a little bit differently and it got kind of confused because it's probably something people more heard, even though they did write this. There's probably some sort of incantation that they had heard. So they weren't sure which way it's pronounced. And then they continue and they write, Ya Hashem Tzvaot, Amen, Amen, Selah, right? Just like a blessing, God, and you should, Amen, you should fulfill this. And then, okay, it's not just this. So first you write this on the hide of a male hyena. Then, nishlachinu lemane v'likberinu be'kavre ad chesayar cheshat. So take your clothes off. Again, the same idea, taking off your clothes. Maybe they thought somehow, either the dog, it could be the dog was after your clothes. That's the way I viewed it. I see someone wrote contamination. Maybe it's contamination. I view it more as the dog was after you. And if you take off the clothes, right, sometimes your smell is on the clothes and maybe he'll go after the clothes and not go after you. Anyway, there's different ways one could try to understand this. You bury them for 12 months in a cemetery. Then you take them out after 12 months, you burn them in a fire. And then you take the ashes and you sprinkle it at like an intersection, a place where a lot of people are passing by. Then you continue. Another thing you should know about, while those clothes are buried for 12 months, those 12 months of the year, when you drink water, you should only drink from a copper tube and not straight from the spring. Because what will happen? Dilma, when you go to the spring to drink water, if you bend down, what will you see? Your reflection. And when you look at your reflection, you might see the shida, you might see the shade, the evil spirit, the listakin, and it'll be dangerous, right? There's this assumption that there's this evil spirit in you. So when the dog bit you, that there's somehow this evil spirit that got attached to you. And if you see him, right, he's kind of invisible, but somehow if you look in the water, you might see his reflection and it might endanger you even more. So therefore do that. His name is Abba Bar Marta, but they also call him Abba Bar Yumi. His mother made him a gold tube to drink water from so that he didn't have to drink directly from the spring and he wouldn't get in danger. Okay, so I see someone's asking, wouldn't you die within the 12 months? So I guess not. And I guess the first stage is enough to get you part of the way there, but you have to get even farther. This, by the way, is similar. Maybe there's an idea here. I didn't think of it till you asked the question, which is it's similar to the idea about Yom Kippur Tolim, right? You do something, you do tshuva, and then you wait till Yom Kippur. That there's a process here. It's not just a one day happens, but something's happened over time. So maybe there's some connection there. Okay, we're back to the Mishnah. Rabbi Mati ben Charash, if you remember, if not, I'll remind you. In the Mishnah on Pei Gimel, Rabbi Mati ben Charash said, you're allowed, if you get bitten by a dog, you can eat the lobe of the dog's liver, even though it's not kosher. The rabbi said, no, you can't. Okay? They said, and then Rabbi Mati ben Charash said, oh, no, you can. And it seems like they had a difference in belief about whether this would actually cure you or not. The rabbis say you can't eat non-kosher, not because if it would save you, of course you can, but they didn't believe, it's a good, just like we read this and say, what, take off your clothes, that's going to help you. Like they didn't think that eating the lobe of the dog's liver is going to save you from this bite. So therefore they didn't allow it. Then there's this other line, and the next thing we said was if you have a throat ache, which seems to be not just a sore throat, but a dangerous one, then you can take medicine and even prepare the medicine on Shabbat because it's dangerous. I'm reading you all these words because we're going to soon explain all of this. In any safek nefashot, any kind of danger, we're allowed to desecrate Shabbat. So Rabbi Yochanan chash b'tzafdina. He had safdina, which is something that hurts you in your throat. Later we'll see it goes to your teeth. and it also goes eventually to your intestines, which is what makes it dangerous. So he had this disease. He goes to this Roman noblewoman. She seemed to be the one who knows what to do. So she gave him medicine for Thursday and Friday. So now Amar La, he says to her, B'Shabbat Mai, what do I do if I need more on Shabbat? And she gave him medicine for 2 days. He says, what if I need it longer than 2 days? Amar La, Lo tzricha. She says, you're not going to need it. He says, but what if I do? What should I do? It's going to be Shabbat. I won't be able to come back to you. And how will I know what medicine to take? This is classic, right? You're always worried before Shabbat. You want to have everything there just in case you need it. So she says, fine, I'll tell you how to make it. But promise me that you won't tell anybody, because this is my livelihood, right? How I heal people. So he makes the following swear. He swears to the God of Israel, I will not reveal it. He goes out and he teaches it in public to everybody what this refuah is for Safina. So, what do you mean? Didn't he swear to her that he wouldn't tell anyone? How did he do that? He swore, I won't reveal to the God of Israel, but he didn't swear, I won't reveal to the nation of Israel. To which the Gemara says, wait, this is lo beseda. This is a desecration of God's name. There was this non-Jewish woman that he took advice from. He swore to her he wasn't going to tell anyone, and then he went and told everyone based on this loophole. He said, well, I didn't say I wasn't going to tell all the people, even though that was obviously what she didn't want him to do. So they claim that he told her right away. In other words, he swore and then immediately said, but I am going to tell them. Okay. In other words, I made this swear to you, but really I am going to tell them. It's a little hard to understand that that's what he really did, but that's what they say. Yerushalmi has an interesting end to the story, because that's where the story ends. The Yerushalmi asked, well, what happened? What did she do after this happened? And he revealed to everybody her secret. So one opinion was he tabda, like ibdala, I forget the words, but ibdala nafsha was something, it sounds like she committed suicide, right? She was beside herself. She didn't know what to do because that was the end of her. And the other option is a different direction, which is she converted because she saw how much he cared about other people. And she said, wow, what a religion. And she decided to convert to Judaism as a result of it. So interesting, two possible ends to that story. So now they say, my avdaleh, right? The Gemara is obviously curious to know, well, what was it? It's nice he told everybody else, but we want to know, what do you do if you're sick with this? So we're going to have a few different opinions. Water in with the leavening agent, right? Like the sourdough starter, I guess, soaked in water. Shemen zayit umelach, olive oil and salt mixed together. Rav Yemar Amar, Seor Gufe, it was the Seor itself, the leavening agent, not mixed in water, not water that it was soaked in, but it itself with Shemen zayit umelach. So this is two similar ones, okay? And Rav Ashi Amar Mishcha Digad Fada'asva, he says something totally different. The fat from the marrow of a goose, okay, that comes from, according to Rashi, it comes from the tip of its, like the head of its wing, the marrow that comes out of the head of its wing. There's marrow in a wing of a goose, but it comes from there, the fat from that marrow. That's what it is. Amar Abaye Ana Avda Lekulu Velo Itase. I had this disease. I tried all of them. None of them worked. But then I heard from a merchant. We always talk about these merchants. They were Arab merchants that went from place to place, right? In those days, remember, most of the people, it's true, they traveled a little bit for business. The average person didn't leave their town. They didn't know from anything outside their little town. So often you find out things from people who find, right? How do you learn about things, right? We read about things. We hear about things from all other places. We do research. Didn't have the opportunity for that so much. Where did they learn things? From the people who were traveling from place to place and would meet other people and would therefore pass on information. So we heard it from this Arab merchant. I take take a date pit that hasn't reached an olive pit. The olive that hasn't reached a third, it hasn't ripened a third of the way. Take the pits from there. Kalinu benura amarachadita. Take it and roast them on a fire, hanging over a rake, like a new rake, and then attach it to your teeth, like your row of teeth where you're having pains, and then take the ashes from there. Okay, so you basically took your your pits, you burnt them on top of a rake or a hoe, actually, put it on top of a hoe. The ashes that you got from there, you now rub on your teeth. Okay, and that should help you. He did this, and in fact, it worked. Mimai hava. So where did this? Where do you get this disease from? Okay, that's the other option. Just 1 second. Okay. So from where did this come from? So this disease comes from warming up, eating hot bread when it's too hot, and eating the remains of kasa daharsana, of these fish, when you fried fish with the flour, and it like cooks in its own oils. If you eat the remains of that, like probably the oil that's left, you could get this disease. Okay, now we're getting really into details, right? Number 1, how do you deal with it? Number 2, what causes it? Number 3, how do you diagnose it? If you put something in between your teeth and then it causes bleeding in your gums. So that is a sign. Rabbi Yochanan, when Rabbi Yochanan was sick with this disease, he did this on Shabbat and he was healed. Rabbi Yochanan, so now they ask, how did he do this? They thought it was just something of the throat and it wasn't dangerous. They said, no. It starts in the throat, but it goes to the intestines, and therefore it's a dangerous disease. Amalei Rav Chia bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan, Kiman, ki Rabbi Mati ben Charash, Damar hachoshesh b'piv mitilim lo sam b'Shabbat. So now Rav Chia bar Abba says to Rabbi Yochanan, according to who does this go? Goes like Rabbi Mati ben Charash. In other words, meaning he's asking him, I don't understand. You sound like you're holding like Rabbi Mati ben Charash, who said hachoshesh b'piv mitilim lo sam b'Shabbat. And right, how could that? And what did he say? If you're sick, you can put this, you have a problem with your throat, you can use medicine on Shabbat. But that was Rabbi Mati ben Charash's opinion and not the rabbis. So Amalei, Shani Omer, B'zo v'lo ba'acheret. I hold that when the rabbis disagree with him, they disagreed only about the dog. Notice they weren't mentioned in that context. There it said the rabbis don't allow it, and Rabbi Mati ben Charash allows. Then it said, and Rabbi Mati ben Charash also allows this. Now, the rabbis don't disagree. So he says, look, the rabbis didn't disagree on that line. They just disagree with Rabbi Mati ben Charash about the lobe of the liver of the dog being an antidote for the dog bite, but not this one. So that's what he says. Now we're going to try to bring a proof for his reading. We're going to basically say, is that really what, like, did the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Mati ben Charash or not? So first they asked, you're holding against the rabbis? And he said, no. I think the rabbis agree with him. So lema mesayah. Let's try to prove it. We're going to attempt to prove it and then attempt to disprove it. And then we're going to try to prove the disproof, but we're not going to really get anywhere with all of this. So then we'll actually have 2 good proofs. But right now we're going to try and not really succeed. Lema mesayah. Let's suggest that this is a good proof. Misha achazo yerakon machilino to basar chamur. Someone who has yerakon, which seems to be jaundice, also connected with hepatitis, you give him basar chamur, meat from a donkey, which is not kosher. That's what we saw about the dog bite. You give it from the lobe of the liver. So these are all things that are forbidden, non-kosher food, or to make drugs on Shabbat. So that's all Rabbi Mati ben Charash. These don't have refuah. These aren't going to cure you, so don't do them. Yeah. When he says be'elu, it sounds like he's saying these, but I don't disagree about everything. I only disagree about some of these. That's the way they read it. So when he says these, it's coming to say, well, I do agree with you about something. What is he agreeing about? So wouldn't it be reasonable to say he must be talking about someone who has this throat ache, is allowed to have medicine on Shabbat? No. They say, no, not necessarily. It could be something entirely different that's not listed here, which is, right? It's saying, these I agree with you, but not about something you say somewhere else. And what's that? Someone who bloodlets for sronche, which they say is askara, which is diphtheria. Or some people say it's diphtheria. There's a whole debate about what exactly askara is. But people who bloodlet for that, the rabbis didn't think that that was what you should be doing for that. We've talked about bloodletting. That was a way that people generally thought was a healthy thing to do in those days, not just in Jewish culture, but all different cultures did that. But specifically for this disease, there's a debate, is bloodletting helpful or not? Now they're going to prove the fact that they can't prove from here that the Chachamim agree about our issue, about the sum. So they want to say, Achinami Mistaber, it's reasonable to say that that was the one the rabbis agree with because of the upcoming Braita we're going to read, a different one. Titania. Again, we're going to see Shlosha Dvarim, 3 things, but it's a bit of a different list. Somewhat the same, somewhat different. Shlosha Dvarim Amar Rabbi Yishmael b'Rabbi Yossi sheshama mishum Rabbi Mati ben Charash. So there were 3 things. Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, had heard from Rabbi Mati ben Charash. So we're on the same person here. Mikizim dam lischon chay b'Shabbat. The first one is this diphtheria. The bloodletting. That's the dog. And the third is the one we're discussing, which is Shabbat. So he says these 3 I heard from Rabbi Mati ben Charash. That's how we know that the bloodletting is a possibility. And since it wasn't in that first list, we're assuming that was the one he must have agreed about. But this one says, again, they say here, these don't work. So now again, the question is these and which ones do. So be'elu lemiute mai, what does it come to exclude? My lavatarte b'chaita lemiute dereisha doesn't mean I disagree with you about the last 2, the sam and the dog bite, but I agree with you about the first. And they're just throwing around suggestions. So obviously, they're going to say you could easily say the opposite. And then if we say it that way, then it means it was the stronchi, the bloodletting, with the strong chi that they disagreed with, and that they agreed with him, but all the rest they disagree, which means they don't think, right? We're back to saying there's no good proof for Rabbi Yochanan that they actually agree on the issue of the throat. But then they say, no, lo atarte dereisha kamaita ulemute deseifa. No, maybe it meant the first 2, I disagree with you. And the last one, I agree with you, which would mean I agree with you about the Samamavet. So we basically, right, it's not clear which ones he agrees with, which ones he disagrees with. It could kind of go either way. But now we're going to bring 2 proofs to show that Rabbi Yochanan's reading is really right, that really the rabbis agreed about the throat. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan used medicine on Shabbat when he had this disease, because even the rabbis agree with Rabbi Mati ben Charash, and it wasn't like he was going by a unique one-person opinion against the rabbis. So Tashma, the Tani Rabba Bar Shmuel. Now we're going to have, again, a list of a few, but here it's going to be a little different. The first one is Ubarashi Iricha, which is a woman who has a craving. So we talked about her before. Machilino ta'ach tashuv nafsha. That's number 1. We feed her until she gets her senses back. Number 2, Mishin ishacho kelev shoteh. Machilino to mechatzar kaved shelo. Case number 2, we know they disagree about 100% because it says so in our Mishnah. HaChoshesh b'piv metilim lo sam b'Shabbat. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yossi Shamar Mishum Rabbi Mati ben Charash. Now we got Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yossi, who says the name of Rabbi Mati ben Charash. Sounds like he's the brother of Rabbi Ishmael. I didn't check that out, but it's likely they're both the sons of, I assume it's the same Rabbi Yossi. Anyway, here we have a list of 3. It's clear the middle one they disagree about. That's for sure, the dog bite. And now we're going to have again, I agree with you about this one, but not about the other one. So now the question is, which is the one he agrees and which is the one he doesn't agree? So we're left with 2 options. We have either the first one, which is the Uvarashi Richa, the pregnant woman who wants to eat, or the one about the throat, which is the one we're discussing. So Bezo Ahaya, which one? Ilema Ubara Pshita. If he's saying, I agree with you about this one, but not about the other one, and the one he agrees with is about the pregnant woman, that would actually make sense that he would agree about the pregnant woman. However, it wouldn't make sense. He says, I agree with you about this one and not about the other one, about the pregnant woman, because there was no machloket about the pregnant woman. Everyone agreed the pregnant woman's allowed to eat until she feels better. Nobody was in disagreement about that. So there'd be no point for the Chamim to come and say, I agree with you about that, because everybody agrees about that. So it's not like it's a question at all. So it can't be that one. It must be he's saying, I agree with you about the throat, that you do take medicine on Shabbat, and I disagree with you about the dog bite. On this one, but not that one. Because the Ubarashi Richa can't even be a discussion between them because it's so obvious that you can do it. So that's the conclusion. That's how we see that the rabbis really didn't disagree about this. And that's why when Rabbi Yochanan used the cure for when he took the medicine for tzafidna, he did it based on the rabbis and not on this one person's opinion. Rav Ashi is going to further prove it from our Mishnah. Rav Ashi amar matniti nami daita. You can also infer from our Mishnah. V'od amar Rabbi Mati ben Charash v'shesh b'piv metilim lo sam b'Shabbat v'lo pligei Rabbanan aleh. So Rabbi Mati ben Charash says, if you're choshesh b'piv metilim lo sam b'Shabbat, if you have this issue in your mouth, right, you have this disease, you can use medicine on Shabbat. V'lo pligei Rabbanan aleh. If you notice the structure of the Mishnah, that's why I read the Mishnah very clearly before. It said the rabbis don't allow the lobe of the liver of the dog. Rabbi Mati ben Charash does allow it. Then it said, and additionally, Rabbi Mati ben Charash says, if you have this problem in your throat, you can take drugs on Shabbat and you don't have to worry because pikuach nefesh overrides everything. So that, right, if there's any doubt about whether you need this for a living, of course we allow it. If you wanted to say if the rabbis disagreed, it should have restructured the mission. It should have structured the mission in a different way. It should have said, if the rabbis really disagree with him, they should have put them two together. Started with Rabbi Mati ben Charash the same way the Braita did. Rabbi Mati ben Charash allows you eating the lobe of the liver of the dog if you got bitten. He allows you to use drugs on Shabbat if you have a problem with your throat. And the rabbis disagree. That would have been a clear-cut way to say the rabbis disagree with all these. But since it starts with the rabbis about the dog, and then it talks about Rabbi Mati ben Charash disagrees with the rabbis about the dog, and then Rabbi Mati ben Charash adds this additional case, and the rabbis don't appear there, it seems like they must agree. And therefore, right, so it should have put them all together. And the rabbi should have just been listed at the end. We forbid all this. And it didn't say that. Shma mina. So he thinks from the structure of the Mishnah, one can conclude that that's the case. That really, it's true. Rabbi Yochanan thought that the rabbis disagree, that the rabbis actually agree with Rabbi Mati ben Charash about that case. And it was really just an issue of, are other things, right? Are these really going to work or not? But when it came to the throat, he believed that you can take medicine. Now we're going to go to the end of Rabbi Mati ben Charash's line, which is, it's right. He says, if you have this issue in your throat, I'm just going back, you can use medicine on Shabbat, which you could have ended the sentence there, right? It's dangerous, life-threatening. But then he adds the words, any doubt about whether this is a life and death situation, one is allowed to desecrate Shabbat. So the Gemara wants to know, why do you need to add those words? It seems pretty obvious. We wouldn't need to say it. So Rav Yehuda Amarav, lo safek Shabbat zo b'vad amru, ela afilu safek Shabbat acheret. It's not only a safek about this Shabbat, it means even if you're not going to die this Shabbat. But if I don't deal with it now, there's a chance that next Shabbat I might die from this. Therefore, you can override Shabbat right now. So, Hechidami, what's the case? Kigon, what does it mean? Kigon amdua litimna Yomi. This is classic. You get medicine. They give you 8 days. You have to take the medicine. Now, what if Yoma Kama Shabbat? The first day is Shabbat. So you might say, look, right, I need to take the medicine, but I don't need to start today. Right? Let's say, right, this always happens. Maybe you went to the doctor 4 days after you're already sick, right? It's not like I took it yesterday. So why should I start it today? Because if I start it today, what will happen? I'll have to take medicine this Shabbat, and I'll also have to take medicine next Shabbat. So if I just push it off till Saturday night, right? Maybe wait till nighttime. Take it Saturday night, so that I don't desecrate 2 Shabbatot. That's what it comes to teach you. Don't worry about next week. Deal with it now, immediately. Don't push off taking medicine. So here's a braita to support this claim that it means even the next Shabbat, not just yet, but right now we're going to start explaining the braita. You can heat up water for a sick person on Shabbat, whether it's to drink, you can drink some tea or something, or to wash, bathe him with hot water, which will strengthen him. Below Shabbat zo b'vadamu, ela l'Shabbat acheret, and not even if it's only for this Shabbat, but even for next Shabbat. Ve'ein omrim lo, namtim shema yavli. Look, you could say, he needs this now, but maybe he'll get better and he'll manage without it. So let's just push it off, because maybe he won't need it. Ela mechamin lo miyad. You do it immediately. Mipnei shesafek nefashot ochet haShabbat. Right, our whole topic here is don't hesitate when needing to, right? Don't be obsessed over thinking it's Shabbat, it's Shabbat. No. Safek nefashot comes in, there's even a doubt about someone's life, we immediately, and we're going to talk about more things about this till the end of the daf, We just say, go for it, right? This is dangerous. We all know that if you don't take antibiotics, other things could develop as a result. That's why people take antibiotics. That's why you have to finish your dose, even though you're really feeling better, right? Don't say, oh, my last day of Shabbat, let's just push it off. I'll finish it tomorrow. No, doctor says, take the medicine, take the medicine. Okay, don't start doubting. Because right, life is more important than anything else. There's the line, right? Not even if you're worried about this Shabbat, but even if you're worried about next Shabbat and not this Shabbat. And there's no chance you're going to die right now. And that's exactly where it's antibiotics, right? You take it now because something could develop further, right? If you have strep, you don't take antibiotics, you get scarlet fever, all these things could develop. Okay, here's their big line. Lo al yedei nochrim, I'm sure you've probably heard this, but lo al yedei ktanim, it should be in nakutim, ela al yedei gdolei Yisrael. You don't have a non-Jew do it for you, right? Normally, there are certain things that you would have a non-Jew do for you. If there's someone who's sick and it's not dangerous, you can have a non-Jew do things for you, or a katan, someone who's not chayav in mitzvot yet, who's obligated to do mitzvot, someone under bar bat mitzvah. But when it comes to safek nefashot, you don't do that. You use Gedolei Yisrael. There was a big debate about a bunch of things about this line. Number one, what's Gedolei Yisrael? Do we mean big rabbis or big important prominent people so that everybody knows? Or does it just mean someone who's obligated in mitzvah, who passed bar mitzvah? That's a good debate. Okay, right? Is it because we want to make it public? Or is the point that you just don't need to worry about Shabbat and just anyone can do it, right? Or is it that we want to teach people so that they know that they can do it, so we need to use those people as role models? So that's two different ways of understanding this line. What if there's a way to minimize? Okay, let's say, right, the Rama actually says you're supposed to do it al yidei shinur. You're supposed to do it a little differently than malacha, than you normally do it. Or according to that, let's say there's three people in front of you. There's a non-Jew, there's a child, and there's a regular person. Do you have a choice who you can use, right? If you say it's just gedolim, meaning age of mitzvot, and not that we're trying to make a big public announcement about this so we teach people, then theoretically, maybe if they're all in front of you, then maybe you're better off having a katan or an ochui. Maybe you're better. Let them do it, right? Or is it only, right? Is it just telling you, don't go searching for them, right? Do it yourself. But if there's someone there, then maybe better to have them do it, because it's always better to minimize. Or is that not a consideration at all? So the Rama actually writes it better to do it with the shino, some sort of change. Don't do the malacha directly. And the achronim on the Shacham Mataz say, I forget who it is actually who comments on it, but the achronim say, no, that's not the case. Like what he said wasn't practical. It was theoretical. It wasn't practical. And of course, you don't start thinking about doing it with the shinoi. It'll delay you, right? If you have to start thinking, you'll delay, and it could be really dangerous. You do it and you do it straight. So this is very interesting debate about how to understand how far we go with this, and do we try to minimize, or do we just, it's as if it's not there? It's very similar to mahutra b'tzibur or dechuya b'tzibur, right? Is it overridden, but it's still there? Or is it just not there at all? So similar to that machloket, if you learned that with us, and you'll know what I'm referring to. If not, next time we get there, you'll know. The ein omrim, here's a very interesting line, difficult for women, but I'll read it. There's two different variations of this line. One is not such an issue. Ein omrim yasu dvarim halalu lo al pi nashim v'lo al pi kutim. You can't take a woman's advice for this or a kuti's advice. Kuti generally they use, I think here it's synonymous with Gentile, even though they're usually the Shomronim, the people who moved into Shomron after anyway, they converted, but weren't real, here they clearly view them as not valid converts. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that whole thing, but you can't listen to them when they say, but if it's an issue of 2 versus 2 or 2 versus 3 people, and they make the third person about advice about whether you can use this or not, this medicine, we can take women's advice. Okay, they can be part of a group and be counted, but not by themselves alone. The Mepharshim try to say why women wouldn't be believed in this kind of issue. It seems very odd. The Riva actually changes the Nusach and says that's not the version. And what it really means is they can be mitzdaref to others. That's what they're trying to tell you. Not that you can't listen to them on their own. And he has a different version entirely. And he thinks the whole first part of the line is not there. So that's an interesting resolution, which means it's not really an issue. And then it resolves our question of why aren't they believing women when it comes to these things. Anyway, that's an interesting question. And I forgot to mention Tosfot on the Gedolei Yisrael, he brings up another issue. If you look at the first Tosfot on the daf, Ela b'Gedolei Yisrael, when it says that as opposed to Gentiles or a child, he says, Afilu hecha de'efshar b'nochri mitzvah b'Yisrael. Even if there's a Gentile right there, it's better to do it with Israel, but not for the reasons we said before. He gives a different reason. Shema yitatzel hanochri v'lo yaseh v'yavo lidei sakana. We're worried the Nochri might not follow through, right? We all know there's people who are very good at following through, and there's people who are not so good about it. And clearly they didn't trust the Gentiles much. And they felt like if they give it to a Gentile or a child, right? Children are less likely to follow through. Then they might not follow through. So better do it yourself because you know it'll get done right. And how many times do we do this in our lives, right? You want to delegate something, but you know if you do it yourself, it'll get done right and not with a mistake. So therefore, this is an interesting thing Tosfot says here. Okay, back to the next section. Now we're on the bright. Tanu Rabbanan, mifakchim pikuach nefesh b'Shabbat, v'hazaris harei ze meshubach, ve'ein tzarich litol reshut mibeit. This means we override Shabbat to save a life. And if you do it zariz quickly, harei ze meshubach, you are rewarded and or praised. Ein tzarich litol reshut mibeit. You don't have to start going to a court, right? Could you imagine if you had to go to a court, how long that would take? And forget the fact that there's really no courts on Shabbat, but I guess it means, don't go taking advice, trying to get three people together to form a beit din so you could have a good opinion about this, yes or no. No, stop thinking, just do it. Okay, now they're going to give you a list of situations. Ha-ketzad. And what we're going to have is we're in the middle of a braita. Every time the braita brings a case, the Gemara is going to interject, even if you do it in such a way, which would be really more problematic. And then they're going to go to the next case in the braita, then the Gemara is going to interject. And at the end, they're going to ask, why do we need all these cases? What was the point? Why wouldn't one just have been sufficient? So what was the unique thing about each case? You see a child who falls into the river or water. You can take the kid's about to drown, you can take a net and fish him out. All of these are going to say the same thing. If you do it quickly, you're rewarded, you're praised, and you don't need to get permission from the court. Even if, here comes the Gemara interjects, even if you get fish in your net. You see a kid who falls into a pit. You can start digging around the pit to get the level lower around the pit so you can get down to the right, kind of make the pit less in height so you can get the child out. Right? Do it quickly, don't start asking permission. Even if you do it in a way that you basically built a step here. You see a door slams in front of a child and locks, and kids locked into a room. You can break the door and take the kid out. Comes in the Gemara. Even if you cut it in very nice pieces so that you have these nice wood chips later to use for something. You can extinguish a fire, or you can put jugs with water in them that will basically around where the fire is so that they'll explode and the water will come out. A lot of debate about why, once you say you can extinguish the fire, then obviously you can put these things, which is what we call gram kiboy, which is an indirect way. So why does it mention that also? Good question. But you can do this for a fire on Shabbat. If you remember in Masechet Shabbat, we learned you can't do this unless it's a feit nefashot. Obviously, we're talking here about a life-threatening fire and not one that isn't life-threatening. We also discussed there that nowadays people claim all fires are potentially life-threatening, and we're even going to see something like that in the Gemara here. So, even if you make, like when you put out that fire, you kind of set up the coals in a way that you can use them for roasting your meat after Shabbat, it's still allowed. Why do we need all these cases? If it just had the water, if I wait, the kid will drown. It's right, seconds I have. But the boy is just sitting in a pit, he won't die. He's freaked out in that boar. Right? What happens if a kid gets locked in the bathroom? Someone goes to try to figure out how to get them out, and another person sits there, right? They say playing with nuts, but in those days, right, we saw the nuts with the in Pesach, but they would play some game with the kid. They talk the kid through it, keep the kid calm. Okay, there's a way to keep the kid calm. It's not as scary as the boar. Right, because of that, therefore it's tzricha. It actually was very funny because at the Shabbat table it came up. We had someone who got into a scuba diving unit in the army, and she was telling us all about the gibush and what she had to do to get in. They blindfolded them, put them underwater for a long time. They had to snorkel for half an hour blindfolded. And she said, yeah, it was fun. but then she said some other kids got very freaked out by the whole thing and, didn't make it basically because, they thought they could handle it, but when it comes down to it, you can't always handle it. And then another person at the table said, they started talking about getting locked in a door. Like if you get locked in a bathroom, would you freak out or not? So it's the same thing that different people react in different ways. So one person at the table said, I would be absolutely freaked out if that happened to me and I would not be calm at all, and so I thought it was very funny because here we're talking about a kid getting locked in a door and, the Gemara thinks, oh, well, calmer than being in a pit, but, and people could calm them down, but, depending on the person, some people have higher levels of anxiety and get more worked up about these things. So it's obviously very tricky, which is why the Gemara says all these cases, you could do whatever it needs because you really don't know how the person's going to react. Just like with underwater or, in the door, you just don't know. And therefore you have to save them. So why do we need that case? Even if the fire is somewhere else, right? You still are allowed to put it out, even though there's nobody there and there's no fear, because maybe it'll eventually get to you. Okay, last topic for today. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says the following halacha, which we're going to have to explain. Lo hachub pikuach nefesh achar harov. When it comes to pikuach nefesh, we don't follow rules of majority. We're going to get back to our famous case of the 9 stores, the 10 stores, 9 non-kosher, 1 kosher, or the reverse, all sorts of situations like that, very famous sugya. So here they say we don't follow laws of rov. Usually we follow the majority, not here. So they ask, hey, Chidami, what are we talking about that we don't follow majority? If it's 9 Jews and 1 Gentile, you don't need to say you don't follow the rov because you do follow the rov, right? You don't need that. You have the majority or Jews. Right? And here it seems like we're talking about, let's say, a building collapse. Okay, can you save it if there's 9 Jews and 1 Gentile? Of course, because we talked about, mentioned very briefly, but there's this concept that we just have to accept for right now that when it comes to a Gentile, we're not allowed to desecrate Shabbat in order to save them. Obviously, if it's not Shabbat, we should be saving them. But if it's Shabbat, we don't desecrate Shabbat to save a Gentile, only for a Jew. So now, that was option number 1. Palga palga. What if it's 50-50? 5 Jews, 5 Gentiles. That's safek nefashot lahakel. Obviously, we always save. So yes. Ela de'ika, right? That's safek. We don't know, right? It's 50-50. So yes. Next. Yes, I mentioned on Shabbat, or on the Shabbat app about thinking about Surfside. Obviously, it's hard, right? It's fascinating learning these things while this is, unfortunately still going on. Okay, next. So next line is Ela de'ika. Tisha kutim b'Yisrael echad. 9 Gentiles, 1 Jew. Hanami pshita. This is what we learned with the 9 stores. If it's in its location, okay, you go into a store. I'll tell you one of the ways the Achronim understand it. It's always difficult to understand the differences between these 2 cases that we're going to set up. If it's in a store, you walk into a store and you don't know whether it's the kosher store or the non-kosher store. The question that's asked is this the kosher store or is it the non-kosher store? Even if 9 are non-kosher, or actually it should be 9 kosher, this question is still 50-50 because is where I am kosher or not kosher? If there's one person, we don't know, right? These people are all where they are. So the question is, right, is it a Jew or is it not a Jew? That's a 50-50 question. Again, once it's 50-50, in the case of the stores, if it's more kosher stores, it doesn't make a difference because 50-50, we don't allow you to eat. Here's the reverse. 50-50, we're of course going to allow you because that's regular safek nefashot. So we can't be talking about that. So it must be, if there were 9 Gentiles and 1 Jew, and one of them went to a different courtyard, and we don't know which one, Ma'u detema, you might say, now regular laws would say, the meat that came out from a store, since the question now is, which store did it come from? We go by the rule. But the majority, if the majority were kosher, then we could say it's kosher, because even though that it's possible it's not kosher, the question becomes, which one? This is just one way of understanding it. But it's more the question, not is it kosher or not, but where did it come from? Where did it come from? Majority rules. So if you say where did it come from, majority rules, you would say the majority are Gentiles. So called the parish, Meruba parish, right? Wherever it comes from a place, we assume it came out from the majority. And that's what Shmuel's saying. We don't hold like majority when it comes to pikuach nefesh. So in this case, even though chances are it was a Gentile, we still allow you to clean up, try to find him in the rubble because there's a chance that it's a Jew. When it comes to this, we're going to be making. To which the Gemara says, Ini, is that really true? Rabbi Yochanan seems to disagree or say otherwise. He says, Tishakuti b'Yisrael echad. If it's where they're living, mifakchim. If it's b'chatzer acheret, that people came from somewhere else and it's not from their main place where they were living, we don't. So they say lo kashya had the parish kulu had the parish mitzatayim. They all went to the new place. Then we know there's a Jew there, and therefore we're allowed to do it, even though we're not sure if what we're doing is actually going to save the Jew. But if some of them came, then we go by Rov and we go by Rabbi Yochanan, who says we don't even know if the Jew's there, and therefore we don't allow you. So that's interesting that we get to this conclusion that there could be a case where we don't allow it. And it's a lot of food for thought, a lot of things in the stuff. I'm going to stop here for today. Shabbat tov to everyone. And I just want to mention that I see somehow there was a Alana Storch had included also. I don't know why it didn't end up in the dedication by accident, but included a Refuah Shlema for Debbie Beer. So Refuah Shlema, and also this week's learning is dedicated for Refuah Shlema to you, Debbie. So Shabbat tov to everyone.